Hello, good afternoon. Today our guest is Jack Donovan. Hello, Jack. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
So, Jack, we're going to have a fascinating conversation. You are a deep guy, and I like fruitful discourse. So, this is the first question, Jack. You're going to tell us a little about yourself as a young man.
Okay. All right. Um, well, I mean, I was always interested in art, and so I grew up with a very normal family in Pennsylvania, and yeah, I mean, it was very artistic and creative, and lived in a small town and just wanted to get out and went to the big city, to New York City, and went to art school there for a while, and then slowly ended up moving across the country, and I've been on the West Coast, or I guess I'm kind of in the middle right now for maybe 25, 30 years. So,
All right, Jack. And you are known for your writings on masculinity. Tell us about your transition to masculinity.
well, I don't want to say if I transitioned to masculinity because I give people the wrong impression. But as far as my interest in masculinity, I've always been interested in sex and gender. I was reading uh, Camille Paglia when I was in high school. So that's always been something that's been interesting to me. But I think I think I probably would have called myself a feminist at a very young age. Uh, yeah, because like I said, I came from a small town, and you're around the kind of guys who are like, well, if you don't do what I want to do when I want to do it, then you're a pussy. And it's like that's not really how successful men really operate. But uh, so I was very turned off by that as young men. But as a grown up who worked in the world and saw how things actually worked for many years, I came back and looked at men and masculinity and the things that have always been important to men and over the years, and it became very important to me personally because I realized in many ways that the things I believed when I was a very young man were wrong. It became kind of an advocate for that, and I find that I wrote about that recently for Chess Magazine in an interview with a Major League Baseball player, Aubrey Huff, and he, a lot of men. There's this myth that men who are obviously masculine or successful have always been that way. And in fact, I think you'll find the advocates for masculinity are also often men who had some kind of problem or weren't seen as very masculine or didn't see themselves as being very masculine at some point in their lives. A good example, and I kind of call it the Theodore Roosevelt effect, in terms because he was known to be a very sickly child, and then became kind of this great symbol of masculinity in his later life. And a lot of the guys that I talk to have whether it's Ian Smith or like Aubrey Huff, they all say like they were very unsure of themselves at a very young age, and then they became kind of advocates for masculinity when they realized that what they had gotten wrong and what they were doing wrong and how they could do it better.
Okay, Jack. And what are some of these misconceptions? Because you said that when you were a young man, you espouse views that are untrue.
Well, I think that the tendency, obviously, to believe what feminists say about masculinity and men's issues and so forth. The biggest one being at this point that masculinity isn't even real, that there is no difference between men and women, and that masculinity is always toxic and always bad. Uh, and that didn't seem to bear out with reality to me. I think that men who are around men who hold them to a higher standard and who have who expect them to be stronger and more courageous and better at things, more competent, and conduct themselves in a certain way. I think that those men end, end up being better and more well-adjusted men than a lot of the men who say that masculinity is stupid and that it's just for dumb rednecks and whatever. And those guys end up being very insecure, I find, and like that's why you see their comments and so forth that they make online are very passive aggressive, and it just shows a lack of confidence on their part.
What is masculinity, Jack?
Masculinity, I mean, obviously, is the difference between men and women. You know, if there's two sides of the coin, there's femininity and masculinity. So you have masculinity. The ultimate ideal of what masculinity is would be the most masculine or most different from women. You know, in the way like most white or most black or most up or most down. So you know, but the ultimate version, there is no ultimate man, or that's an ideal. But I looked at, you know, so what makes men and women different, and that's what I looked at in the way of men, and things that have always been made men and women different, always and everywhere. You know, we men change their clothes from place to place and believe different things, and so forth. But what has always been the same? And I think it goes back to our tribal roots. Our, you know, for most of our human evolutionary history, men were in small bands trying to survive with each other. And so what being a man meant to them was very much related to their job. And their job was obviously to protect a perimeter from outside forces. And, you know, I would, in my newest book, I would say, add to that, create order and protect it from chaos. And that's what men have always done. And that's what we're physically designed to do, because it's obviously, these aren't just theoretical concepts. I mean, men are stronger for a reason, and that reason is because that was our job. You know, like it's part of our biology. We are a little bit more likely to take risks because that we were required to. If you're going to go hunt a large animal or go fight off a tribe that's trying to invade your tribe and rape all your women, then you need to have courage. And you know, things like strength and courage have always and everywhere been associated with masculinity. And
Mas-
you know, yeah.
Masculinity, Jack, is not toxic. Toxic masculinity is quite fashionable today. It's in vogue. But I often reply by saying that it is an empty feminist platitude. You are a writer on masculinity. I like philosophy and some obscure topics. And during my spare time, I enjoy studying personality differences based on race, sex, the nation state, and many other variables. And Jack, the evidence is quite clear. Men like conquest, they're more interested in work, and the male personality is varied. It's more varied than the female personality. Typically, boys are interested in roughhousing and being delinquent, but usually they mature and develop a real understanding of what it means to be a man. Masculinity is needed in moderation. Aggression is relevant, but I prefer intellectual aggression to physical aggression. So, for example, criminals are physically aggressive. CEOs are aggressive, but the aggression of the CEO is a bit more manipulative, it's passive aggressive. So, there are different types of aggression, and there are times when we should use aggression, and in another situation we ought to employ soft power. But masculinity, like all other variables, must be employed in moderation. And this is why the term toxic masculinity is just downright stupid.
I agree. I call it feminist baby talk. It's basically, toxic masculinity is just a, you know, phrase that they came up with to, and the real definition for it is a man who does anything that a feminist doesn't like. You know, it's not, it has no real definition. It's just however they want to move the goalpost and change the value of that. And I always like to remind people that they've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. And that in the 70s, they used to call toxic masculinity testosterone poisoning. It's the exact same concept. They just repackaged it for a new age.
And Jack, feminists should tell us, why are studies consistently showing that women like dominant men, even feminists? If masculinity is so toxic, then women should date more feminine men. But this is not what
Well,
the evidence is telling us. Women like aggressive looking men, they don't like wimps.
oh, absolutely. And that's because, you know, what people say they want and what they actually want are always a little bit different. And that's especially, I think, true for women sometimes. But uh, what people are sexually attracted to is not necessarily what is good, you know, for them, or what they say they want, or That's very different, and that's why I think evolutionary psychology is very. It tells us a lot because I mean, sex generally is not logical. Like what, like in order to reproduce, you would have to have sex maybe a handful of times in your entire life, but most people would like to do it more than that. And like men will throw tons of money and do all kinds of things just to have sex, and it's not. It doesn't make any logical sense, and but it's part of our primal drives, and our primal drives still very much influence the behavior that we have today. So it's not logically say, oh, sorry, my back, I kicked my microphone there.
All right, continue. You may
Cool,
continue
cool,
to
cool.
speak.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, no, our primal drives, I think, influence our behavior much more than we'd like to admit most of the time. So, just because people say something's logical doesn't mean that that's what they're going to do.
Exactly. So, for example, look at the data again. Studies consistently show us that people like attractive men and women. Rich men like attractive women. Rich women like rich men, but they also like men who are attractive. This is what studies tell us. Most people like beautiful people. They're appealing. But in reality, you and also me, we can give many examples of men and women dating average people. So I have a friend who's a psychologist. He's a young and upcoming writer, very brilliant and interesting. And I plan to have a conversation with him on this topic. And I'm going to say, let's say his name is John. I'm going to say, John, according to studies, we like beautiful people. Well, if beautiful people are in demand, why do we know so many people who are settling by dating average people?
I mean, why do beautiful people end up with average people? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but no. You said that sometimes what we say we want is not what we actually want, and I'm saying most people like beauty, but I can give so many examples of people settling for average people. So if beauty is in demand, why are so many people dating people who are just average?
Well, I mean, I think obviously there are more factors involved.
Yes.
Like, and as I often say, the person who you want to have sex with isn't necessarily a person you want to live with on on a regular basis. So, when people settle down, they often make different choices than they would make in a bar. But obviously, you know, and I think it comes down to the individual. You also see a lot of beautiful people with beautiful people.
Yes.
That's they do tend to flock together.
But I think it boils down to long-term investment. So people have a preference for beauty, but if you're a serious individual, you're going to date someone who's responsible. So, for example, studies show that men are more likely to prefer short-term relationships, but on average, both men and women prefer long-term relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's long. That's just because if after you've had like a lot of short-term relationships, you've already had that. You've gone through that process,
And
and
maturity, both physical and intellectual. At some point in your life, you have to grow up.
yeah, yeah. And also, once, like I said, once you've gone through that process, you've already done that, and it's people like to have a little bit more security and a little bit more stability in their lives than like you know a, I know a lot of guys who are pickup artists and so forth, like, but and after a while, yeah, they can go to a bar every single night and try to get laid or every weekend. But after years of doing that, it's tiresome and boring. And so they eventually they want to settle down. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of women are going through the same thing.
exactly. This is why so many of those pickup artists end up dating ordinary women were in essence plain Janes. They want someone mature in the long term.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, you don't necessarily want the 10 at the bar to raise your children. Like that's there's the 10 at the bar has probably been with 100 guys, and she's probably a little bit broken in a lot of ways. Whereas, a woman who has a good head on her shoulders might make a better mother.
And Jack, do you know what I also find quite interesting? We
Hmm.
claim to reside in an age of equality, but I have data for the Caribbean, Europe, and America. Teachers on average have less significant expectations for male students, and male students endure harsh punishments. So we complain about men having privileges, but why don't we speak more about the abuse of boys and how they are treated by teachers?
Well, I mean, that's pretty clear that there's an agenda about that. I mean, to promote females over males, and a lot of the teachers are females. In fact, a majority, and I think one of the reasons for that is frankly because of the culture that they've created, to where like any male who is around teenage girls is really in a space where he can be accused of something, whether he's guilty of it or not, and run out of that industry. And I personally wouldn't want to be involved in that situation because it's a minefield. Any girl could say anything, and then you're on, you're in question, and whether he could be the best guy in the world, and it's a minefield. And so they've created a very feminine uh, centered environment in education, and so I think that that's contributed to that. So yeah, it's like women are just as biased as men are, and so women are obviously biased, I think, against men because they really don't understand. I mean, the age old joke has been that men and women really don't understand each other, and whatever women say is a mystery to men, but the same is the opposite is true. Women really don't understand what men need a lot of the time, and so that plays out on an educational field as well.
Yes, and I recently interviewed a specialist. He writes on gender issues, but I said to him, Eric, compared to your colleagues, you're so radical. Though he's in the business of gender, is extremely nuanced. He doesn't have time for toxic masculinity. And he wrote a book on masculinity. And he said that prior to that book, most books on gender only focused on women. His name is Eric Anderson.
Okay.
Yeah, I had him as a guest recently, and he sounded quite conservative. But another issue of Jack is that some people, especially the more radical feminists, they suffer from cognitive dissonance. So, for example, violence. They oppose violence. These women and their collaborators will even organize a march against violence, but men are more likely than women to be victims of violence. I'm a libertarian. I'm a pacifist in a sense, but my philosophy is a bit eccentric for most people. So I'm not going to get into my Christian pacifism and my realism in international relations. But I get really irritated when violent atrocities are committed, and I'm even more disgusted when people organize a march to stem violence against women, but they will never entertain the thought of doing so for men. If violence is objectionable, it should always be objectionable, even if the victim is a woman, is a man. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's unequally applied, and women. I mean, it's always been. You can look at the ancient myths, and like the ancient stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey and so forth. And in those, there's always women organizing against violence. I mean, they've always done that. Because obviously women have different interests and they want safety and security. Their interest is to raise children, and they don't need their men off fighting wars all the time. So women have always done that. I think that modern feminists are just women who don't have husbands in most cases, and they're women who are just kind of they're organizing against abstract violence rather than like violence that their husbands or so are invested in. And I think they're just getting together to do something to make themselves feel important. Yeah, it's yeah, I don't really take it very seriously. And what's really ironic about that, or hypocritical, I think is even a better word, is that if you look at most of those people marching against violence, um, they also want to defund the police, but they are also calling for like you know men to be put in prison all the time. or men to be charged with crimes for like saying the wrong thing to them or whatever. So they really, in a sense, they're supporting a very fascist society that requires violence, because the only way that you get people into prison is by threatening them with violence. That's people aren't just like, oh well, you accused me of something, I guess I'll go to jail. You have men with guns show up and take them to jail, and that's so feminists, they want to encourage proxy violence. Like they want to encourage, like, let's make more laws so you can't say this and you can't do that and you can't, like, and men have to do this and they can't do this. Well, all those laws require violence to enforce. So I find them very hypocritical and childlike.
Yeah, it's a bother to examine them. That's why these days I ignore them. However, if I'm going to comment on feminism, I have to read dry prose that's often badly written. I'm not one to speak on issues that I don't understand. That's pretentious. If it's pretentious to criticize Judith Butler, if you're not going to read her, another student to engage her works. But yes, I find them to be quite annoying. And you made a very interesting point. Many of these women who are organizing against violence, they have a problem with the use of the word man. So some years ago, it was popular across the media to argue that objects with the word, sorry, not objects, but names with the word man should be eliminated. We ought to rebrand them as something different. But young women are raped in India. It is not unusual for a woman to be raped in India, and the matter will end up in the court, and the judge looks at the issue and is not really sympathetic to the woman. So these women in the West, they will get up and complain about irrelevant issues when women in Asia and Africa are actually experiencing patriarchy that's negative. So they will say in the West, oh, the word man is oppressive. Women in India are being raped in public.
Yeah, well, if you look at the people who are feminists in America, like the mainstream feminists who are, speaking out and so forth, and the people who are um, going in marches and all these things, they're the most spoiled women in the world.
Yes.
They're phenomenally spoiled and privileged. They have no right to ever talk about privilege, because they're probably the most privileged women who have ever existed in all of human history. And yeah, I mean, a lot of their issues really are with their social group. So there, for decades, all of feminist writing was really about frat boys. It was about like what's going on in the sorority, like what's going on in the fraternities, and I mean, they're targeting against like other like privileged white men who are really in their peer group, because they're college girls writing about college boys, and that's what they care about. But they're not all those other issues on the other side of the world, and other things. Obviously, they're weirdly support, obviously Islam is not really great for women, probably, but you don't really hear them talk about that. But they just want to talk about what re like the white guys who like have really like said, hey, we want you to be able to vote, and hey, we want you to be able to live your best life or whatever. They're still mad at those guys. Like they really can't be pleased, and they're just focused on their I think college adversaries.
Well, Jack, you're an expert on masculinity, and I plan to talk more about masculinity. I don't expect to spend the entirety of the discussion exploring dubious women with crazy ideas. So we're going to get back to masculinity. No,
Yes.
sex and civilization. Men are driven by status, and they're also driven by the power of the vagina. So I was in an interview with an elderly academic, and he was egging me on to say the vagina. But yes, men are driven by the power of the vagina, especially heterosexual men. And I'm saying this against the backdrop of men not working. So brilliant economists, they're trying to pin down the reason as to why men are no longer active, or as active as they were in in the labor market. And the answers are ambiguous. We cannot say that men are less likely to marry because of economics, because there are many examples of of the economy not growing yet men we get married. Secondly, we cannot attribute it to video games. We really don't know what's going on. Some of the more astute writers are saying that maybe men are demotivated and as a result, they're not looking for jobs. And I have not written on the issue as yet, but I have an hypothesis that's quite interesting. Remember, I said earlier, men are driven by status and they're also driven by the desire to have relationships. And if men are being maligned or treated as lepers, maybe they will become less interested in relationships. And if men don't want relationships, then will they work? Well, yes, some of the more stoic ones obviously will work, but but many of the average people may just become bums, play video games, or rely on welfare. They're motivated to marry, and if marriage is no longer viewed as an ideal, these men don't have an incentive to build civilization. I think
Yeah,
that this is what's going on.
yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, obviously they're being told that they're horrible, and if you look at most modern workplaces, they're extremely feminized, and they're you're working in those places in a corporation. Most masculine men really don't want to be in an environment. You have your human resources departments and your Byzantine rules about what you're allowed to say, not allowed to say, and it's a very catty environment where a lot of people there's a lot of submission involved and like you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to speak your mind. It's not a masculine environment anymore. The workplace really isn't at this point. And so yeah, a lot of guys, the last thing they want to do is sit in an office where they have to like be careful about what they say and deal with office gossip and politics, and like they could be accused of something at any point. Yeah, they'd much rather sit home and play video games. Why would I want to put myself through that? So you have the guys who are going to be entrepreneurs so they can create their own rules, and there's a lot of guys doing that, or there's a lot of guys participating in alternative economies, in ways that like they're having online businesses or things where they don't have to go to work and deal with that really like non-masculine environment and very very like destructive to their own masculinity and self image. So yeah, I think that the workplace has become like very anti-male in many ways. I mean, I had some corporate jobs and so forth, and yeah, I mean it's definitely a not conducive to masculinity or the behaviors that men want. So they're going to look for any way to do something else and make a living in a different way.
Yeah, and again, the important point, yes, they will find ways to make a living, but if you're not going to have a family, then you live less. You don't need to earn as much.
Yeah, and there's a quote that I like that men and women look at money differently. Men see money as freedom, and women see money as security.
I see money as freedom.
Yeah, like men like, oh, I want to have enough money so I can do what I want.
Yes.
And so you know they don't need as much stuff. Like a lot women have a lot of status requirements. I think when if you're going to start a family, you have to have the house, and then the wife wants the house to look a certain way, and all the neighbors have to think that it's cool, and there's all kinds of things that men do to make women happy, but men are happier with less. I think in a lot of situations, like they don't need their house to look that nice. Like a lot of like young men will go back to a house where there's just a mattress on a floor and play video games, and they're fine with that.
Jack,
So they don't have to have as many things as women want.
Jack, I believe in working really hard, making money, investing to make more money, and then just read books. Yeah, I'm not sentimental about these are fashion or anything like that. I just want to get money because I'm really independent. I don't like to depend on others. So
Right.
I make money, I write, I read books, and I interview intelligent people. That's all I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, men have a different. I mean, that's the way I am. I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I've made money from my books, that I'm allowed, that I can have a separate office right now where I can do cool things, the things that I enjoy doing, like photo shoots, or I can work on the computers design things do things that I enjoy doing, and I don't need a lot more than that. Like I don't need like millions of dollars to do the stuff I want to do. So it's just like yeah, men tend to be focused on like what they actually enjoy doing and some kind of career, and that's about it.
Yes, and live and be happy. I can write, earn my money, have intelligent conversation, and even though I enjoy this conversation, I'm not really interested in friendships. So I speak to someone via email or on YouTube, but I'm not into the friend part of the relationship. That's just not me.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, that's just all. And eat good food and live.
Yeah.
But Jack, on another issue on masculinity, some of these unwise people are failing to recognizing that the issue is not that men are not meeting the standards of women. There's a debate that women are too picky, and as such, they're refusing to date good men who don't have multiple degrees. I disagree with this view. I think the issue is that men are bored, and as a result, they're slowly retiring from women. The bromance is on the increase. Men don't like to be bothered or annoyed.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Men are driving the sex recession, not women.
yeah. I mean, well, I mean, it's a consequence of feminism, really. I
Yes.
mean, the sexual revolution uh, went both ways. Like men used to have to, uh, you know, have an established career, have money in the bank, whatever, and then go look for a wife to support. And now they can get laid whenever they want. So they can go out and get laid whenever they want, and they don't have to marry anyone. They don't, like they can just go out and get laid.
And
So
there's
like
also
why?
AI. There's also AI and porn. So there's no longer
Yeah,
premium on women.
yeah. They don't really need women for anything. If you unless you want to have kids and have a family, what do men need to hang out with a woman for? I mean, men and women. I mean, it's a dirty secret, I think, of humanity is that like men and women really don't like each other a lot of times. Like they're very different, and why would a guy not want to just hang out with his guy friends and talk about the things that he's legitimately interested in, instead of going with a woman to whatever she wants to do that he has no interest in? When you do that kind of stuff, you do it because you're making a sacrifice for a bigger thing, like a family or a long term relationship or something like that. But otherwise, why would he bother? If he's not trying to get a family or a long term relationship, and many, and also the reason why he's not doing that is a lot of men that I know would never get legally married at this point, because the chances of a woman just deciding that, after 10 years of, providing for her, or, working with her or doing whatever she wants, um, she might just decide, I feel like I need to seek more fulfillment. And then you're divorced and you have nothing. And then the state takes all your money. And a lot of guys have gotten wise to that at this point. And so like, why it's not a win. It's not a winning situation for them.
No, marriage is not a plus for men. Marriage is only a plus for men who are thinking about the future. So for these men who want to perpetuate their genes. But for the individualistic man, marriage is not a plus. Why would you marry?
Right.
Remember, the justice system is often siding with women. There's actually a very specific case when the judge Stephen Baskerville wrote the article, and the judge basically said, "Well, the rights of men are not that important. The legal system does not need to be applied to respect the rights of men."
Yeah. And it's amazing that we live in a society that can even say that. But,
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
it's and this is so. For example, I'm not a petty guy, but with maturity, I recognize that saying that men are dogs is actually quite rude. It's not flattering at all.
Yeah, yeah. Dogs are very loyal, but I like
Mm.
dogs. But it is, yeah, like Yeah, obviously, I mean, I mean, in any other context, if you said that about a group of people, it would be considered like racist.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So if if men were to go around saying, "Oh, all women are sluts because my son is actually a bastard. He's not really my son. He's son of Mr. Joe," that would be a problem. But we can say men are dogs and they're always cheating.
right. Yeah. It's easy, you know. Insulting men or is pretty much the easiest way to get applause in the world. I mean, it's the easiest thing you can do, which means it's meaningless. Anything that you can, obviously means something to men, but like all forms of rebellion, they always say like speak truth to power, and if you, you know, the value of speaking truth to power has directly to do with how much it contradicts power. And it's easy to say men are bad, men do this, and a whole bunch of people will applaud you, and it's like you see men do it all the time. Men will do it for likes and approval and whatever. They'll say how terrible men are and how great women are, whether they believe it or not. They'll just do it because it's easy.
Yes, men and women are more supportive of policies benefiting women and they're less likely to attack women. It's called the male disposability thesis. Women are
Yeah,
universally preferred. I don't
yeah,
have a problem with preferring women because women give birth. They are perpetuating the species, but I do have a problem with the unbalanced treatment of women. For example, ladies before gentlemen, not my problem. Equitable, we're living in an age of equitable patriarchy where women are preferred. I don't have an issue with preferring women, but please apply the law equally. That's all I'm asking.
right, right. Yeah, at least, well, do what you say you want to do. I mean, like that's the thing is equality is rarely about equality. It's usually about power.
Yes, and feminists want power. So some years ago, I read an article published in a liberal publication, and the woman, she was basically saying prisons are so harsh. Why should women be imprisoned? But if men commit serious crimes, we want to castrate them.
I know. Yeah, like they say whatever they want. It doesn't. They have really no desire to have internal consistency at all with what they apply. Yeah.
It's just like the case of Emmanuel Macron and his wife. Had his wife been a man, in other words, a husband, that husband would have been viewed as a pedophile.
Right.
Yes, I'm baffled. I'm really, really baffled by that case. Because if a man at some point decided to marry a student he started a relationship with, that man wouldn't be respected.
Yeah. Yeah. He would be vilified for sure.
But Mrs. Macron is not vilified.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really troubles me. It does because I don't like the abuse of power in any form. But then again, I think the problem with me is that I'm too rational for this emotional world, or I try to be.
Right.
Yeah, we live in a really inconsistent age. It's just like the defund the police movement. According to Gallup, people want greater police presence in their communities. Individuals who are in favor of defunding the police are usually rich.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes no sense. Like that's why they call it clown world. I mean, it makes no sense on the face of it. Like it's obvious that that's a bad idea to any serious person. Oh, we'll defund the police. Well, okay, like that's a great way to encourage rape and murder, which you don't like. So, I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and they're not arguing from a libertarian position. So some libertarians have a problem with not just the state, but agents of the states, including the police. But the libertarian option is to privatize the police force. Therefore, people would invest in an alternative that they choose to pay for. But BLM, these guys are just saying eliminate the police. They don't want an authority to monitor criminals, but they do want social welfare or social workers.
Right. Yeah. It's not a viable solution. Anything that they're offering, and that's, I mean, it's comical how quickly it's worked out. I mean, the city of Portland, which is the city I moved away from a year ago. I mean, they had an 800% increase in crime. I think murder. I think an 800% increase in murder. And it was obviously the city that was, most, defund the police and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's very obvious to any thinking man what's going to happen if you do that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously you can do reforms and things like that to be more sensitive to certain populations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're just like let's not have any more police, well, why do you think they're there in the first place? You know, it's like yeah,
It's just a joke. It's just like BLM on its website. BLM said that they want to ensure that our families are comfortable, including women and children, but they don't mention men.
right, of course. Well, I mean, isn't that run by like a radical lesbian
Yeah,
Marxist?
yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
BLM is not about black people. It's about trans rights, feminism, and the black
yeah.
feminist LGBT agenda.
Which is really unfortunate for black men because black men are the ones who get attacked by the police. Like black men have the biggest legitimate claim to be concerned about some of these issues. I mean, they are the ones who are profiled and targeted. I mean, like black women don't experience that nearly, I think, as much as black men do. But so they have some legitimate claims, and I think that a lot of Americans were confused and um, manipulated by that movement because yeah, they are aware that like black men do are profiled in certain ways and are treated unfairly sometimes, and a lot of people supported things like BLM because they thought that they were supporting fixing that.
No.
But in terms, what they're actually supporting is just Marxist feminism.
Yeah, Marxist feminists who may be funded by Marxist organizations from China. These women, they don't care about men, and they want to talk about trans women because trans women are being frequently murdered by black men usually. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
very funny people, and as we have noticed, some of their leaders are becoming quite wealthy. One, Miss Patrice, she bought a nice home in a mansion and she's surrounded by white people. I don't have a problem with black people getting rich. I'm in favor of free markets and wealth
Sure.
creation. But if you're so skeptical of free markets and white people, why buy a mansion in a white community?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's total hypocrisy, and I obviously saw that because I've some experience with these kind of groups in the past. But I mean, a lot of people just didn't know what they were about, and you knew that was going to happen. I think from the beginning was that it was going to be a corrupt thing.
Yeah, these days we can't afford to stress ourselves. We can only laugh, but the hypocrisy is just everywhere. It's just like black media personalities who like to lament racism. Okay, if you think that your lamentations are justified, then do so. You have a right to free speech.
Sure.
But if white people are so bad, why are these elites always dating whites?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of silly.
Yes,
Um,
they're
I mean,
always
fortunately,
dating
there's more and
whites.
more black guys, I think, in society that are speaking out against some of this stuff. I think that are more sensible and understand what's actually going on. I mean, I was actually I sent it to my dad last night. There was a like the Hodge twins, or like are very,
But I
fun,
think the
they're
Hodge
funny,
twin,
funny guys.
yeah, yeah,
But
they're
they're
more comedians than intellectuals, and that's okay. There's a
sure,
place for comedy. But
yeah. But
I'm
I mean,
happy.
they're black guys speaking about the same issues, and
Yeah,
it's good. It's good to see something on the other side.
I'm happy that you're referring to black people. My issue with black discourse is that there are a few older guys like Walter Williams died, Elizabeth Wright died, Thomas Sowell is alive, and Glenn Lowry is also alive. But many of these upcoming black speakers are closer to the comedy side of the spectrum than the Glenn Lowry, Thomas Sowell side.
Right. I mean, Thomas Sowell is a pretty impressive character for
Yeah,
sure.
but I find that many of the younger ones are not intellectually impressive. They're in the business of making money. They're not really intellectuals. They're making money, and that's okay. But they're
Right.
not
Well, I
like
mean,
a Glenn Lowry. They're not very scholarly.
well, I think like if they had a different opinion, how are they going to make it through academia? Like because obviously a lot of those guys, had academic careers,
Yeah.
and I mean, obviously, how could you possibly be a black person or a white person, whatever, like in the collegiate system right now as it exists and make it through uh, with a viewpoint that isn't just straight Marxism. Like that. I mean, that seems to be the norm in that situation.
So like I have an older mentor and he's really smart because he said that if you threaten the establishment, you will be eliminated. So I have a piece coming out and it will be written for a right-wing publication. I won't say the name, and I plan to produce it under a pseudonym for very specific reasons. But I have discovered that if you are a person, whether it be black, white, in between, if you're truly challenging the establishment, you're going to be ignored.
Oh, sure, or suppressed, or like canceled, or whatever. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're going to challenge, I mean, but that's, I mean, I guess that's the way it always is, right? I
Yes,
mean, like that's where just the establishment is on the other side now.
it's just like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is a professor and he has really interesting research papers, but as an iconoclast, he's not that radical. He's pretty
No, he's very
establishment.
moderate. Yeah.
Exactly. Jordan Peterson is not going. I am not going to say that he's not going to, but Jordan, I know Ricardo Dushune. I interviewed Ricardo. We speak occasionally, and Jordan Peterson mischaracterized a snippet of Ricardo's speech because he was saying that Ricardo Dushune was claiming the legacy of white people, and he said that is pride. That is not your legacy. But the truth is that nationalism is quite normal. There's a biological basis for nationalism, and secondly, only white people are disallowed to express racial pride. Black people can express racial pride. Marcus Garvey expressed racial pride. So did Du Bois. But white people cannot have racial pride. And that was the argument being enunciated by Duchenne. And Jordan Peterson is an intelligent man, but he completely mischaracterized the argument.
Right. No, I could see that. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Jordan Peterson gives good dad advice. I always
Yes,
like to say, yeah,
yeah. Jordan Peterson is the father figure to the
yeah.
fatherless and maybe a very good psychologist, but he's not a radical figure who's going to challenge the establishment. Not at all.
No, not at all. Yeah.
It's just like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is a bright guy, but he's not challenging the establishment. There's a limit to what Ben will do and say.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
We all have to pick our battles.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So I would listen to Tim every now and then, but there's a limit to what Ben will say or demonstrate his intellect, because sometimes when he speaks, I say for someone who should be intelligent, you do know better that you're just collaborating with the left. You should know better.
Right.
So these days I because I prefer I don't have a problem getting money, but I prefer truth more than money. So the only time I use a pseudonym is when the article is really controversial and I say, okay, people don't really, well, I don't know if they do, but sometimes prominent people may read my work or follow me on Twitter. So if I'm going to write a piece that's really controversial, I use a pseudonym because I never know when I may need their assistance, and I have benefited from them at some point. So it's not smart to say crazy stuff under the name Lipton Matthews. Again, you have to be careful battles.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, yeah, you pick your battles, and also if you're a public figure or you're saying something, you have the responsibility of being consistent and the possibility that someone will actually listen to what you're saying. So like
And that's
that's
the point. The
yeah,
people with influence may not like all of your ideas.
yeah, yeah.
That's the point. That's why I used a pseudonym. So recently I wrote a piece and I said, no, I am going to use a pseudonym for this. I can't allow it to be pilloried on the internet under the name Lipton Matthews. Sorry. So I use a pseudonym.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the world we live in. And unlike some, I don't believe in dogmatism. Instead of attacking the system, infiltrate it. When you infiltrate it, you can create a new system.
Yeah.
So, but we have to get back to masculinity. Jack, what is male tribalism?
Male tribalism.
Yes.
The basic form of all societies until like very recently. I mean, really, I mean, that's what it really is. I mean, men form groups and to establish and protect their interests and bond with each other and create a culture. It's fascinating how quickly they can create cultures. Actually, even like I've had you hang out with a group of guys for a while and you start to get your own inside jokes. And I always think that language and culture comes from inside jokes in many ways, because you start, using different words to refer to different things, and it becomes it snowballs. And all of a sudden, if someone else came into your conversation, they wouldn't even know what you're talking about because you have all these inside jokes with a bunch of guys. And obviously, inside ideas and conversations where you've discussed an issue and you're all on the same page or you're not.
Yes,
And so I think this is how culture forms. And I think it has been men, you know, grouping together to protect their interests, and then they slowly, they form a culture based on their conversations with each other over time. And I mean, all human societies, I think, really have a basis in that.
and Jack, you like to write on male tribalism and male brotherhood and paganism. Tell us a little bit more about your writings on paganism and the male brotherhood, because they're often criticized for doing so.
Yeah. I mean, well, male brotherhood. I mean, I think that's generally has always again been a good thing up until recently. Like obviously, America was kind of founded on ideas, like Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, and that was generally considered a good thing. Like if we're brothers, then we're not at war. I mean, is really the idea is if we're all on the same page, we're all part of the same family, we're all part of the same team. So I think it's really important for men to have something. Most men really need something like that to fit into, and they need feedback from other men because part of their identity is being a man. It's not just being a man in relationship to women, but it's being a man in relationship to other men. So I think it's
Yes.
really important for men to develop their sense of who they are within a group of men. And so that's, I mean, I think, again, it's always been a positive in human history until very recently with like radical feminists and stuff like that. But I can't, I think it's insane to think of it as a bad thing. And yeah, I forget what the second thing you asked was, but male brotherhood and
No, no, I know. I just you have answered the question. I said that you are often criticized for elaborating the case for male brotherhood and male bonding, and you
yeah,
answered the question.
okay,
But men can only learn how to become men from men.
yes, absolutely.
And then remember how society works and how networks function. Men join networks to learn how to be a man and to achieve. And these networks are often dominated by men. And again, I'm a logician. If I'm going to join a network, I prefer to be a part of a male dominated network than a female dominated network. And for obvious reasons, I don't like to conform. Men score lower in conformity. They score higher in risk tolerance, and they're also less petty. They can be petty too, but men are less petty, and they have a tendency to forget grudges. So for example, studies show that when relationships end, the man will forget about the grudge. So I
Yeah,
prefer to be a part of a male dominated organization than a female dominated organization.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that is true in a lot of ways. I mean, yeah, men can have differences and work them out and still have the same differences and be okay with it in a lot of ways. And we're just decide like this is what we've decided that we're going to agree to disagree on, and as long as it doesn't impact our overall relationship or the other things that we're do, we're fine.
That's
You
what
know,
that's why my YouTube channel has been doing so well. On a daily basis, I like to submit interviews to get people on the show. And I deal with usually older people who are very cranky. Like one today said that she's just a crabby old lady. So I deal with these people who are cranky, but I want my show to succeed and they're big names, so I have to tolerate them, unfortunately. And
yeah,
then I speak to them and we have a good conversation and get likes and people promote it. And they don't know that sometimes I have conflicts with these people.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you don't have to agree on it, and I think that's one thing that's been really positive that's been happening in the men's movement generally recently is it's become very reflective of male behavior. And I think early on, I think it was very petty. Uh, but when I see guys, I mean, I talk to Ryan Mickler. I talk to, I mean, he always comes up in my mind because he seems to be out in front of everything right now. And guys like that, I mean, I can talk to Ryan Mickler, and we have totally different lifestyles and different religions and different ideologies about certain things. but we know what we agree on that's important. And so we can collaborate and work to each other, and he can be a good friend to me and support me and help me in all kinds of ways. And we don't have to agree on every single thing. And but we know what we care about, that's our superordinate cause. And so it's been really good, and I've seen that happen with a lot of men who are were writing about masculinity or talking positive about masculinity. It's like, yeah, we all have different, we're all different guys. We're different, come from different backgrounds, but we understand what we have in common and what's important. And so, like, I mean, yeah, oh, it was an earlier podcast he was talking about Elliot Hulse, but um, I mean, there's guys like Elliot Hulse, there's guys like all these guys in the circle, and we're not, we don't agree on everything, but we're still working together.
And well, Jack, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and it's interesting that I like your work because if you're not a smart person, you're going to think that I'm a walking contradiction. I am a serious libertarian, but also a Christian fundamentalist who is radically pro-science. But it's not a walking contradiction. We can talk about it via email. And I prefer the Christian ethos. You prefer the ethos of paganism, where different people, or as some would say, will to power, will to truth. We're different people. But I've been following your work for a long time, and at no point did I express anger because there was a disagreement. And I'm being honest, I don't get angry.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's good. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, people have different perspectives, and but a lot, like I said, a lot of times you can see what the similarities are.
If we were always agreeing with each other, the world would be boring. And this is why I don't like the term contrarian. We're all contrarian. There's nothing special about disagreeing with someone. Calling yourself a contrarian does not indicate intelligence. If we're always agreeing, we would be stupid people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think for contrarians, to me, that always means someone who's disagreeing just to disagree.
Exactly, they're so
Like,
boring.
but it's important to disagree when you actually have a disagreement.
Yes, but and I disagree with people all the time because I'm openly eccentric. So, for example, years ago, I said to my friend, "I am going to crash random funerals," and I did because I'm interested in philosophical perspectives on death. We can only live by dying. If without death, there is no life. So I'm a big fan of Peter Thiel, but I don't subscribe to the notion of immortality. If we were immortal, we would not remain the same people. So for 5 years, I went to random funerals, and I also said this. I did not share this story with a friend. I shared it with myself. I said to myself once, so couple of years after well, the funerals didn't become boring, but I learned a lot. So I said to myself, after this period, I'm going to try something eccentric. I'm going to infiltrate the white nationalist movement and meet interesting figures on the far right. And this is what I've been doing so far. I like when life is eccentric.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, I like Hunter S. Thompson or something like that. I mean, I like uh, being able to. Yeah, I'm attracted to extreme things and extreme ideas, and people who are outside the norm. So yeah, I mean, that's obviously got me in some hot water over the years. But you know, you know, a lot of people have at least one good point. Like
Yes.
they have something that they're right about. They may be wrong about 10 other things, but that that you know and they aren't all like, everybody wants to make everybody who's not on the mainstream page or whatever into a monster. And a lot of these guys aren't monsters. They've gone down a particular intellectual rabbit hole where something became very important to them, and that became more important than all the other things. And so that's the cause that they chose. And I might not agree with
And
them,
they become
but that doesn't
in
mean they're
love.
bad guys.
Yes, I'm in love with data,
Yeah.
not the idea. I like ideas, but I like the data more. And when the data can no longer support the idea, I move on. So I'm pro West, I'm pro Christianity, but there's this writer. She's a woman. I won't call her name. She wrote a book making a point about Islamic theology, and she's wrong. I'm not fond of Islamic philosophy, but she's just wrong, and that's the truth. And I'm not going to say that she's right because I'm pro Christianity and pro the West. That would be stupid and disingenuous.
Right.
But most people don't have our love for truth. I'm assuming that you have a love for truth in the objective sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, some things work and some things don't.
No, 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 Jack. I read a foolish it piece on you several years ago. The gay philosophical fascist of the alt right. I
Oh
read
yeah.
it and it's not that interesting. What was the point of the article? You're not, are you what's a gay fascist?
I'm not any of those things,
Exactly.
and that was a reporter from New York who
The
lied to me
court.
for an hour.
Yeah, it
Um,
was published by
yeah,
the court.
yeah, yeah. It was a cut. It's part of New York Magazine. She lied to me for an hour. That was supposed
Yes.
to be an article about masculinity and my work, The Way of Men.
Yes, and so from I'm a big fan of Paul Gottfried, and he writes profusely on fascism and many issues. And every now and then we have a personal conversation. I respect his brain, and I'm assuming that he respects me. And nothing irritates me more than people who use a term meaninglessly. If you're going to use a term, just use it properly. So, for example, the fascists are more authoritarian than totalitarian. They're not totalitarian. Don't conflate them. I don't like stupid people. So yes, I did not appreciate that article. And there is a not well not a book, but there are a number of books claiming to explain the so-called contemporary far right, and they're off base. Like you're featured in one of these books.
Oh yeah, yeah, the one by Oxford University Press.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
yeah, I mean that was written by an actual member of Antifa. I mean, if you go to his website and you write,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, he writes for Antifa blogs. I mean, that guy, that's all he's done his whole life is write for Antifa. So it's not objective. It's political propaganda.
Yeah, and these writers are misguided. Many of us don't know what is meant by the term alt-right. I think the present, what we call alt-right is just a foolish movement with a bunch of grifters. But there's a writer called Eric von Ledin. I'm a big fan of Eric von Ledin. I also like Louis Bardin. But when the alt-right first emerged, I expect it to be a modern form of the works of people like Eric Van Ledin and Lou Rockwell, but it just became a group of chatterboxes, and I don't really like them. It's not really intellectual. Many of the obscure philosophers I expected these people to like, they don't speak about. So yeah, that's another useless term, alt-right.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that's really unfortunate what happened with that. I mean, it took on a lot of a life of its own. I mean, I was, I wrote for alt right, Richard Spencer's blog right when it came out, and at the time it was not explicitly white nationalist, and Richard Spencer was running something called the H.L. Mencken Society. Uh,
Exactly.
so so it was just very like it was just critical of basically Republicans. It was like, well, I mean, and they were making a lot of cool points at that time, which were really interesting to me. Like, well, we don't have to hate the environment, because Republicans at that time were very much like, well, yeah, fill the rivers with garbage, whatever. As long as business makes money, we're good. And there were a lot of people in that movement at that time criticizing that, and like, well, why do we have to be obsessed with gays? Like that's there was a lot of eh, things about that. Like that's not the primary issue. And over time, unfortunately, I think Richard kind of like
You went off the deep
decided that he
end.
was white nationalist, and then it became a white nationalist thing, and then I had to kind of exit the room. But you know, I mean, it was really just dissident conservatives, at the beginning. And so now I don't even know if anyone
No one uses the
self-identifies as
like
alt.
no, the stupid mainstream media. Those people do. They
Yeah,
they they use it all the time. Alt right, the godfather of the alt right, Jack Donovan, is a fascist. These ignorant people, they use this term. But if you're a smart person, as I said to one of my colleagues, the alt right is really a reflection of the old liberal right, the old liberal anti-war right. That's the impression I got from some people.
I guess. I mean, I don't even know
Like
what
H.L.
I don't
Mencken.
even know
So
what the alt right would mean aside from whatever the mainstream media says. I mean, it's just another phrase that the mainstream media uses now for bad people. It's like the far right. Like now far right used to be Nazis, and now far right is Republicans. So 50% of the population. And so it's become really meaningless. Like I'm identified as a far right activist, and I'm like I'm actually pretty moderate in a lot of ways,
Yeah, so like
and definitely
this,
not authoritarian. I'm very much I lean a little bit more towards libertarian, especially after
you're an
everything.
old school liberal like H.L. Mencken. You're an old school, it's the old school right, not the
Yeah,
modern right. You're the anti-war, pro-market, anti-egalitarian right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely fall more into the like classical liberal category.
Yeah, but not the classical liberalism of the mainstream organizations. Again, that's really closer to left-leaning political correctness.
Well, now, yeah, what the people who they
Yeah,
call liberals, the people who we call liberals now are not liberal at all. They hate freedom, like, and so it's a very strange world we live in because the words really don't mean what they used to mean.
they're inverted words.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's so for example, the mysticism of the writer and Oswald Spengler. I'm yet to read the book critiquing the far right, but I doubt that the writers really understand Spengler. I doubt that they do.
Probably not. Yeah, I mean, that's just they call out buzzwords, everything,
Yeah, just
Evola and
sound smart.
Spengler, and
Yeah, Alain de
yeah,
Benoit, yeah,
yeah,
Murray
exactly.
Rothbard. It's just name dropping.
Right.
The fascist, the European new right. They're just crazy.
Yeah.
That's why I can't take them seriously if you're going to do something do properly. But you disavow white nationalism. Why?
Well, what?
White
What?
nationalism.
What about it?
I said that, did you disavow it? You're not a white nationalist.
Oh no, and I never was. In
Okay.
fact, there's interviews with. I mean, Greg Johnson wrote about me when I was writing for them. Like I set it up when I started writing for them. I'm like, I don't believe in this. I think white supremacy is stupid. I
Johnson's
said
not a white supremacist. I interviewed him and he said that
I
he's not
know.
a white
Well,
supremacist.
nobody in that
Yeah.
movement really says that they're that. That's something the media makes up. But I mean, I wanted to be very clear about what I believed and what I didn't. And like I've never thought that like America could be a white country. That all seemed foolish to me. And I said that from the beginning, and they just liked my work, and so they published it for a long time. And I they there was some they obviously they cared about masculinity in the future and whatever, and so they cared about some of the things I was writing. And but I've never been a white nationalist, and like I said, I don't really believe in their cause, and
Yeah.
I
I
and
can understand the logic of white nationalism and white advocacy. So I've written for some of these publications. I'm in favor of Western civilization, but I am not a white nationalist. I believe in preserving Western culture. And I often say to these people, I don't have a problem with white advocacy, but please, the goal should be to appropriate the West as a philosophy of progress and promote Western culture, not necessarily whiteness. And they don't get the message. They don't get it.
yeah, it's unfortunate they got stick. The thing with white nationalists that's a real problem is that they get um, what the entry point I think that is interesting for people, and the thing that they're right about is obviously that there's a double standard that you can say terrible things about white people and it's fine and it's celebrated in society. And whereas you can't, anything like that you would say about any other race, you can't do it, and that's not fair, and that's not what they say that they want, the equality that they say that they want. But the problem with white nationalists, they get stuck, and this is something that the left is kind of right about sometimes, is that they get stuck into this blame circle where they focus on other groups of people. And with white
Exactly
nationalists,
my point. Like it's like some of
yeah,
these white nationalist public. Well, countercurrent is a little better, but many of them they keep writing about the flaws of black people, and I say to them, write about Western philosophers, write
yeah,
about Hegel. Why are you telling me that black people are nonsense? Why?
yeah, that's trashy. Yeah, I mean it's stupid and it's not true. And at the same time, I mean, it's like when I first went and spoke to some white nationalists for the first time, I'd never really met any. And the first place I ever went to where they were white nationalists, I thought that they would all just hate black people, and they never talk about black people. They talk about Jews, and that's what they talk about all the time. And they're obsessed with that's the problem is they're kind of obsessed with Jews, and to the point where they actually attribute these people with all of the evil that has ever happened in the world. And
No,
it's not
no.
logical. It's not
Critiquing
supported.
Jewish power structure is not problematic. Even arguing that the Jews perceive themselves to be a distinct people, this is not a problematic point. But I do have a problem with the Jewish overkill.
Yeah, yeah. They focus too much on that. It's like, well, what about China? You know, like is China run by the Jews too? They just make a lot of points that don't make a lot of sense because they've become obsessed with that
Yeah,
particular
and so
group of
for
people.
example, some of these, like Edward Dutton interviewed me, and maybe I should ask him. Maybe Edward disabled the comments because they were mean. I saw them. I don't care if people are mean. I don't need validation from people. But even if you're a black person who's on the right who agree, who shares some of their sentiments, they're still upset. They're just so stupid.
Yeah,
Not that I
yeah,
want their respect, but they're just so silly.
yeah, yeah. They're a circular firing squad, and I find that a lot of times that they're a mirror image of Antifa. Really, I mean, they're a mirror image of the same thing. They're obsessed with things. They don't care about truth. They've gotten to a point where they just care about. They have very specific things that they care about, and they don't care about anything else. And they're yeah, it's
There are
very unfortunate.
people, complaining that guys like Paul Gottfried and Gregory Johnson offered to be interviewed by me. People literally complaining that these leaders in the movement are willing to be led by Lipton and his nose.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, they are the worst stereotypes of racists. Really, a lot of the guys in that community really are that. Unfortunately, there's some smart guys, you know, that have, you know, like Greg's. We used to be a philosophy professor. He's a smart
Yeah.
guy. I mean, I can't hang out with him or do whatever. I don't want to be associated with him anymore because obviously he's chosen the hill he wants to die on, and that's not my hill.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, he's a smart guy.
Yes, he's really
And a
smart.
lot
I
of those
really
guys are
enjoyed our
smart guys.
conversation. He explains complicated terms like metapolitics so well, and he has a really firm grasp on the work of Alain de Benoit. So I like Greg
Yeah,
Johnson a lot,
yeah,
and he's
he's a
so
nice guy.
eloquent. He's really eloquent. I like his speech. I like his tone, but. I like countercurrent, but Greg is not really my problem. But some of these people are just so annoying, like they're just really too annoying.
Yeah, they're very childish and vulgar, and it speaks to their brokenness as people. I think a lot of you know, like obviously not. I wouldn't say that about Greg. I would say that about, but a lot of his followers are very broken people.
Yeah,
And they're stuck on an issue that, and they're very angry, and it's a bad. You know, it's not. They're not healthy people looking for good positive solutions. They're healthy people who like being angry. I mean, they're
yeah.
unhealthy people who like being angry. Yeah,
Yeah, they really like to be angry, and they just assume that posting a video of some Roman white general makes them important.
I know, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
oh, you put you. I mean, like all their profiles are Arno Brecker statues. You know,
yes,
yeah, it's really comical.
yeah, it's comical, but this is the last issue we're going to discuss. So, Jack, we're talking about masculinity. I'm not quite interested in sexuality. I like to read it, but I'm not having sex. I'm not dating. I'm very abstract. But Jack, you write a lot on masculinity, and you're gay, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it's more complicated than that, so I don't normally
Yeah,
talk about it. But yeah, I
yeah.
mean I'm bisexual, but I mean it's not.
But you're not fully gay.
No.
How come I didn't know this?
I mean I don't really talk about it a lot. I mean I don't like to talk about my sexuality. It's
Yeah,
like
it's lame.
other
It's
people
lame.
like to talk about
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
sexuality.
They make it really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I
It,
think it is interesting, but it's like if I talk about that,
that's
then
why I
that's
waited for that's why we spoke for over 1 hour. So now we're going to have a laugh about sex.
yeah,
It's not that
yeah.
important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like I said. I mean, I'm really passionate about what's going on with masculinity and helping men. And there's a bigger problem in the world, and I feel like I just don't want to have that eclipsed
Yeah.
by talking about something that I really don't care what gay people do, and I don't care about their causes, and you know, I don't really associate with them, and so you know, it's just not something that I think is productive for me to talk about mostly.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not that important. But you're an interesting guy, so you tend to put an interesting spin on issues, and that's why I said, tell me about your transition to masculinity. Because one of the articles, the person said that you left the effeminate gay life behind, some nonsense like that.
Yeah, yeah, and then people, like there's so many gross people that like, like they want to make everything into scandal. They're basically yellow journalists, right? I mean, they want to make everything into scandal and intrigue and whatever. And I mean, obviously, I changed. I think I realized what I thought was better, and then strove to become better.
Yes.
That's which I think is admirable and what you should do.
But I'm I'm interested in the evolution of sexuality and philosophy. And you're philosophical, but I've never asked. Like I've met gay people, but they're not philosophical like yourself. So I don't waste time asking these questions. Like Jack, if you're speaking to someone who's not overly smart, don't be an ass by insulting them. It's not cool.
Yeah.
But I've always wondered, like Eric Von Ledin, I respect him, but his views on homosexuality are a bit outdated. But Jack, what drives attraction to men if you're a man? I've always wanted to ask an intelligent person this question, but not that, but someone
Well, I
in the
think
community.
Well, I think that the men, uh, like they, in the way that like birds become imprinted very
Yeah.
early. I think I always think of it as like a def, definitely a different switch got flipped. Like they flip. They like. I think a lot of it happens when men are younger. Like, and it's something that forms very early. And so like men become very focused in their sexuality and what they
Yeah.
like and don't like, and it tends to get locked in pretty easy. Now I'm kind of interesting because I can alter that to a certain extent, and but it's other people get very fixed in that state, and then that's why they kind of say that that they're born that way,
Yeah.
they can't change, they just want to be accepted for what they are and whatever. But I just think that, yeah, I mean, a certain percentage of the population has always, for whatever reason, and I don't think it's genetic at all.
Okay.
I think that basically like it has to do with your self perception
Yeah.
at time, the way you conceive yourself versus other men, and they think of themselves as being different, and that might all just be in their head,
Yeah.
but like the way that's how you relate to the world. And so
Well, so,
you eroticize an other, and I think at a very young age, and I would say that my sexuality now is very different than it was when I was very young. But so I just have kind of adapted to whatever my situation is.
so what's the difference now?
I mean, I would say when I was younger, I would say obviously I was a lot less confident in my own masculinity.
Okay.
I
Okay.
was always a confident guy. I mean, I've always been like, I always thought I was important and I'm going to do something important.
Yes.
I
You're
was
on the
never,
show. You're achieving your dream. You're on the Lipton show.
yeah. Well, people always assume that, and this is what I really, really hate. This bugs me. Um, People always assume that all of my writing is because I was angry about being homosexual.
No, I don't pick that up. I don't get
Yeah,
that
no, but people always do.
because
I
they're
mean, that's
dumb.
that's
They're
been a
dumb.
criticism of me for a long time. And man, that is not the normal reaction to being homosexual. Like you don't become
Exactly.
Jack Donovan because you don't write books about masculinity or whatever. I mean, that's just not a normal reaction to that. I was never angry about that. I thought it was. I mean, if anything, I thought I was being like interesting and transgressive when I was younger. And now, I mean, I don't see it as interesting and transgressive at
Because it's
all.
not. What's interesting is the philosophical aspect of it. So, for example,
Yeah,
men who are masculine,
yeah.
why are they interested in other men? I have various views on this topic, like the sexual preferences of people in general. I'm interested in that topic for academic purposes.
Yeah, well, I think that, like I said, I think it becomes fixed very early, and it doesn't necessarily have to make sense. In terms of, like what you liked when you were a teenager is probably still what you like, and that's it isn't intellectually consistent.
Yeah.
I would say and it doesn't have to be. Like that's like people always like think that like, oh, I wrote the Way of Men for some reason like that, and or they like well, how are you still homosexual when you wrote the Way of Men?
Because your
Like, wouldn't you have
homosexuality is
changed?
separate. No, it's separate from
Yeah,
your
yeah. I mean, I'm not
philosophy.
like I'm going to redesign my life, in my 40s because I wrote a book, and yeah, I changed my mind about a lot of things. And I don't, I'm not really a big advocate of, I think that society promotes homosexuality far too much,
Yes.
and I don't think that it's always positive. I think that gay men usually have pretty sad later lives.
Yes, according to data, they do.
Yeah,
Depression, suicide, mental health issues. Yes, you're
yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of unhealthy behaviors that because they don't have any social structure or like really prescribed life path.
And many of them
Uh,
don't have friends. They're not they don't choose to be asocial. They literally don't form proper relationships, so they're quite lonely. They're not alone. They're lonely. Many of them are like that.
I think there's a lot of that, and there's also a lot of people. I think the other side of that is that what you have in that community is that you have a lot of guys who um, go out to, like their scene is in bars, like their scene is in bars or nightclubs or whatever, and so they spend their entire lives in bars and nightclubs, and so you have these guys who their entire social circle, and they do have friends, um, has to do with parties, and they become, whereas like most men their age would have been married and have kids
Yeah.
and have all these responsibilities. You can, be a gay dude and be going out and getting laid and having fun into your late 50s, early 60s,
Yes.
and be doing drugs every weekend and a whole bunch of stuff that's really not productive. And you see a lot of that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
you
why
know,
that's why some older writers argue that homosexuals are living a Peter Pan existence. That was
the
once
what?
popular. No, in the past, older writers used to argue that homosexuals were living a Peter Pan existence. They didn't matriculate to the level of manhood.
Yeah, and that's a little bit true. I mean, I would say that that's a little bit true in most cases. Now, not always. And it's like I have, I have readers that reach out to me, whatever, and some of them are actually pretty cool guys who have figured it out. They figured it out. They figured out how to make it work for them and be productive guys and be solid dudes. But there's a lot of other people that are just like, broken in a very different way. I mean, I like to joke because gays generally hate me, and so do Nazis, and their criticisms are so close that I have to guess which one that is. Like when I get a mean email from a gay or a mean email from a Nazi, I'm like, gay or Nazi? I don't know. Like because they say the exact same things. It's really kind of funny.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting? So I'm surveying the data on, they call themselves mostly straight. The men who have sex with men, that term is not really employed anymore. They say that they're mostly straight. That's a popular term that they use. But I've been reading the data, and what I find interesting is that homosexuality is divorced from masculinity. So hyper masculine men who sleep with other men, many of them do not, surprisingly, they do not view penetration as a form of subordination.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's that's where it becomes very, like that's a complicated issue.
The masculine men, they don't view being penetrated as being subjugated. And I find that to be quite interesting, because if you're not in the gay community, you're seeing that the masculine partner is not being penetrated. But yes, it's something that I find interesting.
Yeah, I mean, personally, that's not obviously to me. I think that it is. Like I would agree with most straight guys on that. But then
Okay.
again, I also obviously have met a lot of guys who have been able to separate those two things, and be very masculine dudes. Like I know a guy who's a Marine, like an active duty Marine right now, and like I mean he can shoot better than me and all kinds of stuff, and he's a bottom, like so it is what it is. But it's very you can have, like I think, contradictory things can exist in human beings. I think you know, and we figure it out as we go along.
Yeah, so like I have had some very weird personal experiences. So I have a friend, right? And he met some random guy once, and the random I don't have a problem sharing this story. So the random guy went up to him and said, do you know anyone who's gay? I have a 10-inch and I am planning to use it on someone who's gay. And my friend said no. And that story is funny. Do you know why the story is funny? Because had I been in that situation, the results would have been different. So like once I was a student on campus walking, and this man is running behind me. So I'm like, I have not lost anything, and this guy is running behind me. Maybe he's gay, and he runs and he says, "Okay, what's up? Are you on Grinder? Are you on Jack?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Do you jack off?" And I'm like, "No." And I said to him, "I'm not interested." And I said, "You are gay?" And he said, "No, I am DL." And he wouldn't go away, but eventually he did.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's something that gays do. Unfortunately, they're very aggressive. Can be very. They're men, and so they can be very sexually aggressive sometimes. And I think that no one's allowed to talk about that because it's like bad,
Yeah.
But I mean, they are sorry. I mean, they can be a little bit too sexually aggressive at some points. And that's not really good for anybody. I mean, my job is to work with, obviously, all my friends are straight guys, and in order to have friendships like that, I have to be able to separate that and not have that be an issue, and just deal with them as guys. And so a lot of gay guys can't do that. They're always kind of like, well, maybe, and
Yes.
that's like I to me that's like that's a moral line that I have personally, like that I will never press that. I will never bring that up or press that issue because it affects my whole ability to have like productive male friendships.
Yeah, but Jack, you're so heterosexual and masculine. Heterosexual men, they have only male friends, but they sleep with women.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you're doing on the flip side. You don't have gay friends. You have mostly straight friends, but you don't sleep
Yes.
with your straight friends.
Okay, that's
So,
what you're
so
saying
yeah,
now. Yeah.
you get what I'm saying.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's accurate. Yeah, like most gay people I can't hang out with. I mean, they're Democrats to start with. I mean, they're all like so. There's that. But we just don't have a lot in common.
Yeah, I've met a few of them, and they're usually smart people, but they like sex. They really do. They like sex.
Yeah, I mean, they tend to be, like they have no boundaries. Like they don't have, like they're not married. They don't have the social boundaries that come with that. They don't have, any other boundaries. They don't have women as well, a big problem with gay men is generally that they don't have
Women to
women are,
pacify them.
yeah, women are sexual gatekeepers, and men are just men, and so like they don't have to worry about getting pregnant, so they'll just do whatever, so it's they tend to be more promiscuous.
Yeah, so like let me give me before we wrap up my last story. So when I was in the business of crashing funerals, I stumbled upon a colleague from school. We weren't really friends, but he was a colleague. And we were speaking and the funeral ended. And I'm like, I'm going home. And he's like, can I follow you home? And I'm like, no. Then he says, let's go to this place. And I won't name the place, but he said, okay, let's go to this place. So at that time, I'm being naive. So we went to the park and he's like, okay, so can I follow you home? Can I give you a kiss? Can we go in the bathroom? And I'm like, no.
Right.
But yeah, I have many weird experiences, but I'm not afraid to shame them. It's neither here nor there to me.
What's interesting is that and this is what gay dudes get away with in our society. um if you would do that to a woman, it would be like that's some Me Too shit.
Yes.
Like like that. Yeah, you come up to a strange woman and try to get her to have sex, like openly be like,
Mhm.
just like go right to like let's have sex. I mean, that's sexual assault in our current environment. I don't really think that that's really sexual assault because you're still asking, but in our current environment, if you went up to a woman and did that, they'd like report you. But
Yeah.
gay men kind of get away with that, which is kind of, yeah, like no one really talks about.
Because one, men are embarrassed to share these stories. I'm not embarrassed. And two, I was not touched. So you have control over how you respond to other
Yeah.
people. And it's a good story. So for someone who's an actually conservative Christian, I think I have really interesting stories. I'm not puritanical.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
mean,
it's
that's good. I mean, you have to live in the world that we actually live in. Yeah.
yeah, and I like good stories. But Jack, I'm a bit loquacious. You're an interesting guy, but unfortunately, I have to wrap up.
Okay.
Yes, but this I'm assuming that this video will do really well, and so far maybe it has been your best interviews. All my interviews are the best interviews.
All right. Sounds good.
All right then, bye Jack.
All right. See you later.